knock on the door echoed through the otherwise quiet house, and for a moment, I froze. The sound was unremarkable, just like any other knock. But this time, I felt an unshakable sense of dread crawl down my spine. I hadn't been expecting anyone, and yet there it was. The disruption, the invasion, the beginning of something I could not have predicted. It was my nephew, Ryan. He stood there on the threshold, a cocky grin plastered across his face, but there was an unmistakable air of condescension about him. He wasn't the same kid I'd welcomed into my home just months ago. Back then, he had come to me with a sob story. His apartment had flooded. His life was in turmoil, and he needed a place to stay for a little while until he got back on his feet. I was a soft touch, the kind of person who would take in family, no questions asked. I offered him the guest bedroom, told him to make himself comfortable. Little did I know that the simple act of kindness would soon turn into one of the worst decisions of my life. I had never imagined that my nephew, the kid I watched grow up, the one I had treated like my own son, would turn into a viper, waiting to strike. "I need to talk to you," he said, his tone flat, almost too calm for the situation. His eyes flicked over my shoulder, scanning the interior of the house, sizing it up like it was a piece of property. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Ryan hesitated for a moment, then his expression hardened. "I'm evicting you." The words hit me like a slap to the face. It didn't make sense. Evict me? From my own house? From the place I had opened up to him without a second thought? My heart sank, but I refused to show any weakness. I stared at him in disbelief. "What did you just say?" "I'm evicting you," he repeated, his voice colder now. "You've been living here long enough, and frankly, it's time for you to go. I want my space back." I felt a surge of anger bubble up inside me, but I controlled it, biting my tongue. What was he thinking? Why was he doing this? I had given him everything, my home, my support, my trust, and now, in one cruel moment, he was throwing it all back in my face. But deep down, I knew I wasn't going to let this slide. Ryan might have thought he was in control, but this was far from over. In fact, this was just the beginning. I stood there, my mind reeling, trying to piece together what Ryan was saying. The words didn't register at first. They couldn't. He was my nephew, for crying out loud. I'd spent years helping him, attending his graduations, watching him get his first job, supporting him when things went wrong. Never once did I expect that one day he would stand in my living room, delivering a sentence of eviction. "You're serious?" I finally managed to ask, my voice shaky despite my best efforts to stay composed. Ryan didn't even flinch. "Yeah, I am. It's my house now, and I want you out. You've been here long enough. I've been patient, but this is my time." The words landed with the cold force of a hammer. "My house?" I repeated, still struggling to grasp the reality of the situation. "Ryan, you don't even own this place. This is my house, my home, my everything. I let you stay here because you needed help. I thought I was doing the right thing." He waved a dismissive hand, as though my words had no weight at all. "Yeah, well, you've done enough. Now I want you gone." I felt the anger rise up, in me, but I forced it down. He was family after all, and I'd always tried to do right by him. But this was beyond anything I could have imagined. His betrayal stung like 1,000 needles. "You're just going to throw me out like that?" I demanded, my voice growing louder. "After everything I've done for you, you're just going to walk away from all the help I've given you?" Ryan's expression didn't change. In fact, his smile only deepened, the smugness in his eyes making my stomach churn. "You should have thought of that before you got so comfortable. You've been living here rent-free, taking advantage of me. It's time for you to learn that nothing is permanent." His words were like poison, seeping into my veins. Everything I had done for him, everything I had given him, seemed worthless in that moment. It wasn't just that he was trying to throw me out. It was the complete disregard for the sacrifices I had made. The years of opening my home, giving him support, believing in him. And now, I was the one being pushed aside as if I had never mattered. I was shaken, but I refused to let him see it. I had to keep control. I had to keep my dignity intact. I don't know what's going on in your head, Ryan, but this isn't going to happen. I'm not leaving. Ryan leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms, his arrogance growing by the second. You don't have a choice. I've already talked to the lawyer. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. After that, I'll start the legal process. It felt like a punch to the gut. The lawyer, the legal threats. It was all part of his plan, his strategy to drive me out. My own flesh and blood, plotting behind my back, preparing for the moment when he would tear my life apart. And just like that, he had turned the tables. It wasn't even about me helping him anymore. It was about his own greed, his own desire for control. He didn't care about what I'd done for him. He didn't care about the years of kindness I'd shown him. It hit me then. Ryan had never been the person I thought he was. All the smiles, all the gratitude. Those were just performances, distractions while he set the stage for this moment. He had been playing me, and now I was the fool. You think you can just take everything? From me? I spat, the anger bubbling to the surface. You think you can throw me out without any consequences? Ryan's smirk never wavered. I'm just doing what I have to do. You'll be fine. I'm sure you'll find somewhere else to stay. The audacity, the coldness, the lack of any remorse, it was infuriating. I had no idea what had happened to him. Where was the nephew I had taken in? Where was the kid I'd helped through the rough patches? This wasn't him. This was someone else entirely. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't just sit back and let this happen. Not after everything I had done. Not after everything he had taken from me. I wasn't going to let him win. Not like this. As Ryan's words continued to echo in my mind, a surge of disbelief washed over me. My entire life had been turned upside down in a matter of minutes, and the reality of the situation settled in with a cold, suffocating weight. This wasn't just about a place to stay. It wasn't even about the space he was trying to reclaim. It was about control. About him trying to strip me of my dignity, my rights, my peace of mind. But more than that, it was about everything I had worked for, the sacrifices I had made, and how easily he was willing to dismantle it all. I had no idea where Ryan's cruelty had come from. Was this the same nephew who used to come to me, with tears in his eyes, asking for advice? The same one who swore he'd be eternally grateful for my support? Now, he was standing in my living room, essentially telling me to pack up and leave like I was nothing more than a temporary inconvenience to him. But I knew this went deeper than just a personal betrayal. Ryan had no idea what he was messing with. He didn't realize that in trying to throw me out, he was jeopardizing more than just my emotional well-being. He was putting everything I had worked for at risk. I wasn't just facing a fight for my home. No, this was much bigger than that. This was a battle for my future, for my financial stability, and for my reputation. I had spent years building up my life, my business, my assets, my security. And if Ryan succeeded in pushing me out of my own home, it would leave me vulnerable, exposed. My professional reputation was tied to the stability I had built, the image of being a responsible, self-sufficient adult. If I were suddenly forced into homelessness, or worse, if I lost everything, in a legal battle, I wouldn't just lose my home. I would lose everything I had spent decades creating. Ryan thought he was just claiming some petty victory by forcing me out, but what he didn't realize was that his actions could unravel everything I had worked so hard to establish. My peace of mind, my stability, my career. All of it was hanging by a thread, and he was about to sever that thread without a second thought. What he didn't know, though, was that I had a lot more at stake than he could ever comprehend. This wasn't just about losing a roof over my head. It was about my ability to provide for myself and my future. It was about my right to live with dignity and respect. And then, there was the bigger picture. I couldn't let this go, not just for me, but for anyone else who had ever trusted him. If I allowed Ryan to get away with this, it would send a message that people like him could walk over anyone, take what they wanted, and face no consequences. This wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was a warning, a reminder of how easily greed could poison someone's soul. I wasn't going to let that stand. I couldn't. I wouldn't. I had spent my life putting others first, helping them when they needed it most. And now, it was my turn. My turn to take back what was mine, to stand up for myself in a way I never had before. Ryan may have thought he could tear everything down with a few words, but he was sorely mistaken. This wasn't just about a fight for a house. It was a fight for justice, a fight for fairness, a fight for everything I had built, and I was ready to win. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I couldn't just sit back and let Ryan's betrayal unfold without doing something about it. I had spent too much of my life working hard, building up everything I had, only to have it jeopardized by someone I had taken in and treated like family. The anger boiled within me, but I knew I had to be smart. This wasn't just a knee-jerk reaction. This was my livelihood on the line, and I was going to make sure Ryan regretted every second of this. I needed a plan, something calculated, something that would take Ryan by surprise and expose him for who he really was. No more playing the victim. I wasn't about to beg him for anything, especially not my own home. But I wasn't going to fight him head-on either. I needed to outsmart him. The first thing I did was gather my thoughts. I took a deep breath, sat down at my kitchen table, and started writing everything out. Every detail, every moment Ryan had been with me, every gesture of kindness I had extended toward him, and every subtle sign of his growing resentment. I needed to see the full picture, everything he'd done to manipulate and take advantage of me, without me even realizing it. I had to gather evidence that would prove his actions weren't just rude, but entirely calculated. I went back to the first day he arrived. I recalled the subtle hints, his reluctance to contribute, his complaints about the house being too small, his insistence that I cover his expenses while he found his footing. It seemed harmless at first, just a young man trying to get by. But looking back now, it was all part of the plan, a slow build-up to what he was doing now. But I couldn't just rely on my memories. I needed cold, hard proof. I knew Ryan well enough to understand that he was the kind of person who liked to have his hands on everything, to control situations in ways most people wouldn't notice until it was too late. He had likely been setting things up, probably behind my back, thinking I was too naive to catch on. So I started investigating. I went through his phone records, text messages, and social media accounts, anything that could give me a clue as to what he'd been planning. I wasn't going to let him get away with destroying my life without having evidence to expose the truth. The more I dug, the more I found. Subtle threats to his friends about how he was ready to take the house back. There were messages where he bragged about how he was going to clean up and get rid of the dead weight. It was all there, in black and white, plain as day. Ryan had been plotting this for a while, and I was just too trusting to see it. Next, I turned my attention to his finances. I didn't want to just stop at his threats. I wanted to show his manipulation and his greed. Ryan had been living under my roof without contributing much, always claiming he didn't have enough money, always asking for more. But the truth was, I knew he had been making more than enough to help out. And the little bits of information I found in his bank statements were enough to expose his lies. It wasn't just about the house. It was about money, control, and power. I wasn't about to walk into this battle blind. I had a strategy now. I had the tools to bring him down. All I needed to do was get everything organized, build my case, and then let the truth unfold. I wasn't just going to expose his selfishness and deceit. I was going to show him that he couldn't destroy me. He couldn't erase everything I had worked for. And when it came time for me to confront him, I'd be armed with more than just words. I'd have the proof to take back my life. The moment was coming. The moment when everything Ryan had done, all the lies and manipulation, would come crashing down, and when it did, I would be ready. I had the plan in motion. The pieces were falling into place, and I could already feel the tide turning in my favor. Now, it was time to execute. No more hesitation. No more wondering if I was doing the right thing. Ryan had forced my hand, and now I was going to make sure he faced the consequences of his actions. The first step was to solidify my evidence. I needed everything in order. His texts, his financial records, the messages where he had bragged about how easy it would be to take everything from me. I spent days going over every piece of information I had gathered, cross-referencing and verifying each one. It was painstaking work, but it was necessary. If I was going to expose him for the manipulative liar he was, I needed to be meticulous. I also consulted with a lawyer. I wasn't going to just sit back and let Ryan play his games. I needed professional advice on how to proceed. I wasn't going to let him outmaneuver me with his so-called legal threats. With the lawyer's guidance, I started to understand the legal angles better. My rights as a homeowner, the power of the evidence I had collected, and how to respond to Ryan's claims without making myself vulnerable. The first step in my plan was to make sure Emily didn't know what was going on. Not yet. She was fragile, and I couldn't risk her breaking further until I had a solid foundation to confront Michael with. She was already in the midst of grieving, the loss of the man she thought she knew, and I couldn't add more weight to her burden until I was sure that I could present her with a victory. A solid victory. But for me, this wasn't just about keeping her safe. It was about justice. Michael had stolen from her. He had manipulated and lied to her. And now it was my turn to turn the tables. I knew I needed a clear, undeniable way to bring Michael down. It wasn't enough to show Emily what I had uncovered. I needed hard evidence, proof that would destroy him. It wasn't just about revealing his financial dealings, but making sure he paid for the lies he had told, the web of deceit he had spun around us all. The first step was to target his secret accounts. I had discovered a few of them in the messages I'd found, but there were more out there, I was sure of it. I couldn't rely on the local bank or financial records. They would be too easily manipulated. I needed to dig deeper. That meant going after the companies and individuals he had been involved with, the people he had trusted with his shady dealings. I would follow the money trail to its end, no matter how long it took. But the financial side wasn't the only issue. Michael had been playing Emily against me, making her think she was the problem in their marriage, making her feel like she was somehow unworthy. He had built this narrative, this facade, where he was the victim and she was the one at fault. I needed to expose him for what he truly was: a liar, a manipulator, and a coward. I knew I couldn't do this alone. It was time to get some help. Someone who could dig into his dealings without raising suspicion. I turned to an old friend, a private investigator I'd met years ago during a separate matter. He was discreet, skilled, and had a reputation for uncovering the kind of information that would bring even the most careful people to their knees. It was expensive, but I didn't care about cost. Michael had taken enough from my family. This was an investment in my daughter's future, and I would stop at nothing to make sure she got justice. The investigator's name was John, and when I called him, I could feel the weight of the decision settling on my shoulders. But there was no turning back now. I had to move quickly before Michael had the chance to cover his tracks further. "I need you to follow the money," I told him, my voice steady but filled with a quiet intensity. "I need everything: bank accounts, investments, properties, anything you can find, but make it clean, no mistakes." John agreed without hesitation. "I'll get on it right away. Don't worry, Cheryl. I've got this." I hung up, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. This was the turning point. I was no longer the victim of Michael's manipulation. I wasn't just a mother trying to protect her daughter. I was a force, ready to tear down the walls of his deception and expose him for the fraud he truly was. The next part of the plan involved gathering the evidence I needed to confront him directly. Michael wasn't going to get away with hiding behind his lies any longer. I needed to have everything, every document, every email, every phone call recorded. I had to be meticulous. But the most important part of my plan, the part that would finally bring him to his knees, was the confrontation. I wasn't going to let him walk away from this with an apology or a flimsy excuse. No. When I confronted him, it would be in front of everyone. Emily, his colleagues, anyone who had ever supported him. I would expose him for the fraud he was, and no one would be able to ignore the truth. Michael thought he had it all figured out. He thought he could escape this without consequence. But what he didn't realize was that I had been watching, learning, and waiting for the right moment to strike. I wasn't going to let him slip away quietly. He had taken everything from Emily, and now it was time for him to lose everything. The days felt like weeks as I worked tirelessly behind the scenes, gathering the evidence I needed to expose Michael. John, the investigator, was making progress, but I couldn't afford to sit back and wait. Time was of the essence. Michael was still a part of Emily's life in the background, and while she was slowly recovering, I could see that she was still holding on to some hope that things would somehow work out. I had to make sure that hope was erased, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I needed her to see the truth for herself, to understand just how deep the betrayal had gone. In the meantime, I focused on Michael's every move. I started tracking his habits, his routine. I knew where he went, who he met with, and when he'd be at his most vulnerable. One of the first things I discovered was that he had a secret business meeting scheduled in a week's time with one of his shady associates, a man by the name of Victor Holloway. Holloway was no stranger to the underground world Michael had been dabbling in. He was a man of questionable morals, involved in a range of illicit ventures. Michael's ties to him were troubling, and I had a feeling this meeting would reveal even more. John had been busy pulling up every scrap of information he could find about Michael's hidden assets. It didn't take long before he found another set of offshore accounts Michael had set up in countries with no extradition treaties. It was clear Michael had been planning his escape from Emily for months, funneling money away from their joint accounts into these untouchable funds. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was a direct attack on Emily's financial security, her future, and her ability to provide for herself and their children. But it wasn't just about the money. The more I dug into Michael's life, the more I realized just how far his manipulations went. He had been playing a dangerous game, setting Emily up to fail. He had planted seeds of doubt in her mind for years, slowly eroding her sense of self-worth. It wasn't just the money he had stolen. It was the confidence he had destroyed, the trust he had shattered. And now, it was time for him to face the consequences of everything he had done. I made the decision to confront Michael once I had everything in place. I wasn't going to give him any more room to maneuver, any more time to cover his tracks. I had seen enough to know that his arrogance would be his downfall. He thought he could walk away from this unscathed. But what he didn't realize was that his own lies were going to catch up with him. I reached out to Emily, asking her to meet with me for lunch. I could see the hesitation in her eyes when she agreed, but I knew this was necessary. She needed to hear the truth from me, not just from a document or a piece of evidence. She needed to understand that I wasn't just protecting her. I was standing beside her, fighting for her, as any mother would. When we met, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Emily sat across from me, her eyes still red from the tears that hadn't stopped flowing since Michael left. She was fragile, unsure of what to expect. I could feel her holding back, trying to hold on to a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, Michael would return and everything would go back to normal. "Mom, what's going on?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't hesitate. I couldn't. Michael has been lying to you, Emily, and he's been lying to me, to everyone. I know everything. Her eyes widened in confusion. What do you mean? What are you talking about? I've been looking into his finances, his movements. He's been hiding money from you, setting up secret accounts. He's been planning his escape for months. It wasn't just that he didn't love you anymore. It was that he had an entire life waiting for him on the other side. He's been using you, manipulating you, all while setting you up to fail. The shock on Emily's face was almost too much to bear. She opened her mouth, as if trying to speak, but no words came out. Her hands shook as she clutched the table, her body trembling with the weight of the realization. "Mom, I can't." "You need to hear this." "Emily," I said, my voice firm but gentle, "he doesn't care about you. He never did. All he wanted was to get what he could from you and then walk away without a second thought. But I won't let him do that to you. We're going to make sure he faces the consequences." As I spoke, I could see her beginning to crumble. The pain in her eyes was unbearable, but I had to push forward. This wasn't just about healing a broken heart. It was about giving her the strength to reclaim her future. She needed to know that Michael had taken everything from her, and now it was time to take it back. "I've already started taking action," I continued. "I've got the proof, the documents, everything we need. I'm going to make sure that he can't get away with this. He'll be exposed for everything he's done. I won't let him destroy you, Emily. Not now, not ever." Her eyes filled with tears as she stared at me, finally understanding the magnitude of what was happening. "But what if I can't do this? What if it's too late?" "It's never too late," I said, my voice strong with conviction. "We're going to fight, together, and we will win." The weight of the conversation lingered between us, but I could see the fire begin to rekindle in Emily's eyes. The woman who had been broken was starting to emerge again, and with that, I knew the next step in our journey was already in motion. Michael thought he had won, but he hadn't. Not by a long shot. It was time to finish what we had started. The day of the confrontation arrived sooner than I expected. I had the evidence, the strategy, and the determination to bring Michael to his knees. Emily, though, still raw from the betrayal, was standing beside me now. She had found strength in the truth I had shown her, and I could see a fire in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Together, we were ready. Together, we would bring Michael's house of lies crashing down. We decided to confront him at the same location where he thought he could escape everything, their old family home. Emily had refused to leave it, clinging to the memories of happier times. But today it would become the stage for the ultimate reckoning. I had already arranged for John to be there as well, quietly observing in the background, making sure no stone was left unturned in this final act of justice. Michael had no idea what was coming. He thought he was meeting with Emily to have one of those predictable, painful, let's talk about the divorce discussions. He thought this was just another chapter in his plan to slink away without facing the full consequences. What he didn't realize was that today, everything was about to unravel. I was calm as I stood by the front door, the weight of everything that had brought me here pressing heavily on my chest. Emily was beside me, her expression a mix of resolve and anxiety. She was finally ready to face him, to look him in the eye and demand an answer for the pain he had caused her. She had spent too many nights wondering if she had missed the signs, questioning her own worth. But now, she had no doubts. When the doorbell rang, my heart skipped. It was him. We let him in, and Michael walked in confidently, as though he were still in control of everything. His arrogant smile faltered slightly when he saw the seriousness in our eyes, but it quickly returned. He was a man who never truly believed anyone would challenge him, not on this scale. His charm was his armor, and he wore it like a shield. But the moment he stepped inside, I could see the realization dawning on him. This wasn't going to be the conversation he expected. This wasn't going to be easy. And I wasn't going to make it easy for him. "Cheryl," Michael said, his voice smooth but cautious, as if he could still somehow talk his way out of this. "Emily, we need to talk about everything. I know things have been difficult, but we can work through this, I swear." I didn't waste a second. I cut him off, holding up the envelope filled with documents I had painstakingly gathered over the last few weeks. "No, Michael. We've already worked through it. You've been lying to us both for months. You've been siphoning money from our family accounts, hiding assets, and planning your escape without any consideration for what it would do to Emily." He froze, his face draining of color. The arrogance that had once defined him crumbled as I slid the papers across the table. "These are just a few of the things I've found," I continued, my voice steady. "I have everything. Proof of your secret accounts, your lies, your manipulation. You've been playing a game, Michael, and I'm done being a pawn in it." Emily stood beside me now, her eyes locked on Michael. Her voice shook at first, but the more she spoke, the stronger she became. "You thought you could destroy me and just walk away, didn't you? You thought I wouldn't see through your lies. But I see you now, Michael. I see exactly who you are." Michael's face twisted with a mix of disbelief and panic. He had been caught, and in the face of undeniable evidence, he had no way out. His perfect world, the one he had so carefully constructed, was collapsing. He was exposed, and there was no hiding from it now. "You don't understand, Emily," he stammered, his voice no longer confident. "I didn't want to hurt you. I couldn't keep living a lie. You don't know how hard this was. For me?" I laughed, cold and biting. "Hard for you? You've been living a lie for years, using my daughter, using our family, and then you thought you could just walk away scot-free? You think you're the victim here? I think it's time for you to face the truth." I turned to Emily, who was standing tall now, her hands clenched by her sides as she took the final step toward her freedom. "Michael, I'm done, and I want you out of our lives. I want you to walk away, and when you do, I want you to understand this. You're never going to have control over me again, over her again. We will rebuild without you." The silence in the room was deafening. Michael looked from me to Emily, searching for any sign that he could still manipulate the situation. But there was none. This was the moment he had feared, the moment when he realized he was the one who was losing everything. "I'll fight this," he muttered, though I could hear the desperation creeping into his voice. "I'll get a lawyer, "You'll do nothing," I said, cutting him off again. "The law is already on our side, and you will have to answer for everything you've done, for every lie, every deceit. This is not your game anymore, Michael. You've lost." As he turned to leave, his face pale and defeated, I knew that this was the final blow. Michael had thought he could control us, manipulate us, and walk away untouched. But now, as he walked out of that door, I realized something profound. He had been the one deceived. He had underestimated the power of a mother protecting her daughter, and the strength of a woman reclaiming her life. When the door shut behind him, I turned to Emily, who had tears in her eyes, but this time, they were tears of relief. "It's over, Mom. It's really over." "Yes," I said, my voice filled with the kind of satisfaction that only comes from knowing you've done the right thing. "It's over. And you're free now." I had reclaimed our lives, our peace, and our dignity. Michael had been exposed for the fraud he was, and he would face the consequences. As he walked away, broken and alone, I knew that justice had been served. We had won. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe.